Let's face it, keeping up with cybersecurity can feel like a full-time job sometimes, right?
It really can.
But today we're going deep on a threat that's as fascinating as it is important to understand. Um,
Definitely.
Advanced persistent threats, or APTs.
APTs are really interesting because they're not your typical in-and-out cyber attack.
Right.
Think of it more like a digital spy operation.
Ooh, huh?
A stealthy, long-term infiltration often orchestrated by nation-states or highly organized cyber
Like a
criminals.
cyber espionage thriller.
Exactly.
And these attackers can stay under the radar for years, like just patiently gathering intel, waiting for the right moment to strike.
That's right, and that's why this should matter to you. The impact of these attacks can be devastating.
Yeah, no kidding.
We're talking governments, corporations, critical infrastructure, even healthcare systems all being targeted.
So let's talk about what makes these APTs so different from, say, your average hacker. What sets them apart?
Well, one of the things that makes APTs so unique is their level of sophistication. They don't just rely on simple malware. They employ complex strategies, often tailored to specific targets.
Interesting.
And as we've mentioned, their persistence is key. They embed themselves within systems, which makes them very difficult to detect.
That almost like.
Imagine a vine slowly wrapping itself around a tree,
I like that.
becoming more entrenched over time. That's what an APT is like.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So why do they do it? Is it just about money?
Well, money is certainly a factor for some, but APTs are often driven by something much bigger power.
Oh, wow.
Nation-states might use APTs to gather intelligence or to disrupt their rivals, gain a strategic edge.
I see.
And then you have cybercriminal groups who might steal intellectual property for profit or even to cripple their competition.
So it's all about leverage.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's break down how these attacks actually happen. I understand there are distinct phases involved.
You're exactly right. It's
Yeah.
a very methodical and strategic process.
Okay,
The first phase is research and planning, just like a good intelligence operative. They do their homework.
makes sense.
They leverage open source intelligence. They scan social media, anything to gain a complete understanding of their target.
So it starts with recon, just like a real spy mission.
Precisely.
What happens next?
Well, the next stage is initial access and compromise. Take Operation Aurora, for example.
Okay, I've heard of that one.
This was a real-world APT attack where spear phishing emails were sent to employees.
Nice.
And when those emails were opened, malware was downloaded, granting the attackers a foothold within the network.
So they're in. What's the next move?
Now things get really interesting. The next phase is expansion and lateral movement.
Okay.
Once they have that initial access, they spread like wildfire,
Uh-oh.
exploiting weak passwords, stolen credentials, unpatched software, anything they can leverage.
So they basically go from room to room.
Exactly. Think of it like the WannaCry ransomware attack.
Right.
That's a perfect example of how rapidly these threats can spread.
WannaCry was definitely a wake-up call for a lot of people. So once they're in, it seems like they can get into every nook and cranny.
Yeah, that's right. And that leads us to the final phase, data capture and exfiltration.
Okay.
Remember, their objective is sensitive data, financial records, intellectual property, government secrets.
Right.
They'll use encryption covert channels to avoid detection, silently siphoning off that valuable information.
Wow, so they infiltrate, they spread, and then they start stealing data.
That's the APT playbook.
Okay, so let's talk about the impact now. How bad are the consequences of an APT attack, really?
The consequences can be severe. We're talking financial losses, reputational damage, legal ramifications, even complete operational disruption.
Wow, so they can really bring a company to its knees.
Absolutely, and no one is immune.
You mentioned earlier that no one is immune. Could you give us some specific examples of targets and how this plays out in different sectors?
Of course, governments are constantly under attack.
Right.
Imagine the implications of stolen classified information or disruption of national security. It's a huge risk.
Yeah, definitely. And what about corporations?
Corporations, especially those with valuable intellectual property, are prime targets.
I see.
We've seen businesses completely crippled by the loss of trade secrets or other sensitive data.
It's a scary thought. What about critical infrastructure?
That's perhaps the most frightening scenario. Imagine a power grid collapsing due to an APT attack.
Oh, wow.
The impact on society would be catastrophic.
Yeah, no kidding. And we can't forget about healthcare.
Absolutely. Sensitive patient data being compromised or medical services disrupted. It's a very real threat.
Okay, so this is serious business, but it's not a lost cause, right?
Yeah.
We can fight back against these attacks.
You're absolutely right. It's not about giving up. We can and we must fight back.
So how do we even detect these attackers if they're so good at hiding?
Well, there are a number of methods we can use. Network monitoring is key.
Okay.
We need to be on the lookout for unusual traffic patterns, any signs that something might be wrong.
Mm,
Endpoint protection is also crucial, securing every single device on the network.
makes sense.
And then there's log analysis, carefully examining system activity for anything out of the
So
ordinary.
it's about being really thorough.
Exactly. We need to be vigilant on all fronts.
It sounds like we need to be both reactive and proactive in our approach.
Absolutely. Prevention is just as important as detection.
So how do we stop these attacks from happening in the first place?
It really starts with the basics. Keeping systems updated, enforcing strong passwords, using multi-factor authentication, all of those things are crucial.
Right, the fundamentals.
Exactly. We also need to be conducting regular security audits
Okay.
to find and fix vulnerabilities before the attackers can exploit them.
Makes sense.
And of course, user education is a huge part of it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. People are often the weakest link.
Absolutely. We need to be training employees how to spot phishing attempts and just practice good cyber hygiene in general.
Right. A well-informed workforce is a strong defense.
Exactly.
This all makes sense, but it also sounds like a lot to manage.
It can be.
Are there any tools or solutions out there that can help organizations implement these best practices more effectively?
There certainly are, and that's where Stonefly solutions can really make a difference.
I've got to agree with you there. I've been so impressed with how we've really integrated these concepts into our products.
I agree.
We understand how serious this threat is. Can you give us a little more detail on how these solutions work?
Sure. One of the key aspects of our approach at Stonefly is a focus on air-gapped and immutable backups.
Okay, I've heard those terms, but can you break that down for us?
Of course, air-gapping essentially creates a physical separation between your data and the network.
So it's like an island.
Exactly. It's like having your most valuable possessions locked away in a vault that's completely disconnected from the outside world.
So even if attackers manage to breach your network, they can't touch the air-gapped data.
That's the idea. It acts as a true safety net.
Wow, that's reassuring. And what about immutability?
Immutability means that the data itself cannot be altered or deleted, even by the attackers themselves.
Oh, wow.
Think of it like writing something in permanent ink.
I see.
Once it's there, it can't be changed.
That's incredible. So you're not just protecting the data from being stolen. You're also ensuring that it remains trustworthy and usable, even if an attack does occur.
Precisely. That's the beauty of it.
So you're essentially creating a tamper-proof backup.
Exactly. And what's really great is how seamlessly these features can be integrated with your existing infrastructure.
Okay.
We've made it very straightforward to implement these powerful protections.
So it's not just for the big players with tons of resources.
Not at all. Our solutions are designed to be accessible and practical for organizations of all sizes.
And if you're interested in learning more about our appliances, you could always contact us at sales@stonefly.com or visit our website, www.stonefly.com.
Exactly. We're happy to help.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by all of this, but it's encouraging to see companies like ours developing solutions that can make a real difference.
I agree, and I think it's important to remember that security is an ongoing journey.
Right, it's not a one-time fix.
Exactly. We need to constantly adapt and evolve to stay ahead of these ever-changing threats.
We've covered a lot of ground today. We explored the nature of APTs, how they operate, the impact they can have.
And most importantly, how we can defend against them.
Right, it's not a hopeless situation.
Not at all. By understanding APTs and implementing strong defenses, we can mitigate the risks.
Knowledge is power.
Absolutely. And remember, it's not just about technology, it's about people processes and building a culture of security awareness within your organization.
A multi-layered approach.
Exactly.
So if our listeners are walking away from this deep dive with one key takeaway, what would it be?
I think the biggest thing to remember is that APTs are a serious threat, but they're not insurmountable.
Right.
By understanding how they work and by putting those robust defenses in place, those multi-layered defenses,
Yes.
we can protect ourselves. We can protect our organizations.
Absolutely. And for those listeners who are looking for ways to safeguard their data, those robust solutions, don't forget to check out our air-gapped and immutable backup appliances at Stonefly. We're really leading the charge when it comes to APT defense. And if you want to learn more, you can always contact us at sales@stonefly.com or visit our website, www.stonefly.com.
It's never too early to start thinking about your security posture,
Right.
Being proactive is key.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. This has been a fascinating look into the world of advanced persistent threats.
Definitely.
We've learned a lot. I hope our listeners have too. And remember, the fight against cyber threats, it's ongoing. It never really ends.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly. But with the right knowledge and the right tools, we can stay ahead of the curve.
Absolutely. And if you're looking for those tools, you know where to find us. Stonefly has you covered our air-gapped and immutable backup solutions. They can really make a difference for organizations of all sizes. So don't hesitate to reach out to our team at sales@stonefly.com or visit our website at www.stonefly.com to learn more.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Everyone stay safe out there.